Hi, it's Bernie Wall here, and I want to talk to you today about IELTS speaking. Now, I know from a lot of my students that the speaking is often left to the very last minute, and sometimes not even practiced at all. But it is one of the areas of IELTS that you have a lot of control, because you are the one producing the language, and it's up to you how much vocabulary you have or how good your sentence structure is, and you can prepare yourself well to meet that challenge in the exam. If you compare with, say, the listening and the reading, where you have no idea what's going to come on that test, then it does put you a little bit more in control of this part of the test itself. And so with a little bit of practice, you should quite easily be able to move yourself to band 7 and 8. And if you're looking for an overall score, that will greatly help improve that score. And it's one of the areas where you can do very well and get a good overall score. If you're looking for a 7 in everything or an 8 in everything, then the speaking could be one of the things that you are certain about when you go into the exam. But in order to get a high band, you do need to be well prepared. So what I want to do in this video is to give you 5 things that you can do to practice so that you are able to reach 7, 7.5, or even 8 or 8.5. And the very first thing, number 1, is to speak and to find people to speak with. This is vital because speaking is an activity. It's something that you have to practice and you have to improve skill on. And it's not something that you can do effectively by yourself. So it's really important to find people, especially people who might be at the same band level as you or have the same desire of a band level, so that you can practice this well. If you don't have people in your immediate vicinity, then there are plenty of places online where you can find people to practice with. I think English Club, if you Google English Club, they have groups who practice speaking. I don't know if it's IELTS related, but I'm sure they do have some IELTS related groups. If anybody else knows of any groups, perhaps you can put them in the comments box below. On my IELTS step-by-step program, which is my self-study signature program, there is also a facility there for meeting with other students on that program who are all around band 7, 7.5. So there are places to find speaking partners, but I would urge you to do it and to try and do it fairly regularly so that you can keep building your speaking skills. Okay, number 2 is vocabulary. If you go through some of the old lists of cue cards or task cards from previous IELTS speaking, you'll see the topics that come up again and again. And it is quite useful to find dedicated vocabulary for those topics. And this is the same whether it's part 1, part 2, part 3. So in part 1, they might ask you about the house. Think about the types of furniture or the types of room arrangements or something to do with the garden. If they ask you about cooking, think about some words you might be able to bring in on cooking. But you can always be developing your vocabulary by learning new words. Another area of vocabulary that you can study for the speaking is idioms. So the examiners do like to see some natural language. So try and pick out, not too many, you don't want an idiom in every sentence, but a few idioms that you could use across a range of topics. And even better, perhaps some phrasal verbs. So if you can find some phrasal verbs that you could use and practice those in your speaking practice. So when you're working with other people on your speaking, or if you are in a classroom with a teacher, try and bring in an idiom or some phrasal verbs into your speaking practice. The third thing is some information on part 2. In my experience, both as an examiner and also as a teacher and trainer, I find that a lot of students fall down on part 2. And part 2 is completely in your hands. You are in control of that. You're given the task card, and then you can say or explain that task card however you want. Now, if I'm asked to stand up and say a few words at a party or at a wedding or at another event, it is a little bit nerve-wracking to do that. So it's important to practice. And I think even most native speakers, if they were asked to say a few words, might have a little practice first and think about what they're going to say. So if you're not a native speaker, then how much harder is it to do it without any sort of preparation? Now, by preparation, I mean just doing it in your practice time so that when you meet that part of the test, it doesn't make you panic or it doesn't worry you because you're so used to doing it. So I want to say a little bit about the part 2, and I'm going to share my screen because I have a couple of slides here that I can show you if that comes up. Okay, so we're talking about speaking. So good speaking result needs some preparation, and it certainly does. And the part 2 preparation, I think, is probably the most important. And also, it's something you can do very easily by yourself. Okay, so here I have prepared a little, sorry, I'm just trying to move that screen up a bit off the page. I've prepared a topic. So this is one that I think was in one of the Cambridge books. So describe a situation when you were late. What was the event you were late for? What was the reason that you were late? How did you feel about it? And explain how you handled it. It's a very typical kind of question that you're likely to get. And what's interesting, if you've probably noticed, is they're usually in, there are a few steps or a few points that you're asked to mention. You don't have to do this, but it is a good idea because they structure it in order to allow you to make a nice little speech or a little mini talk. So the first thing is to work on your notes, work on that 1 minute preparation so that you have some notes that are going to be helpful to you and usable. And then when you speak, you can expand on these notes. So on the right hand of this slide, I have put a few notes that I've made based on this situation. Now, I think that if you say approximately 3 things for each of the points, it should give you around 2 minutes. Now, I have tried this one myself a couple of times and it got to 2 minutes or just over 2 minutes using the notes that I've got here. You can't be absolutely exact about the 2 minutes, but it just gives you an idea. If you say too little, and I was working with a student earlier today and she only managed to do about 40, 50 seconds on this, you're just not giving yourself the best chance. I was an examiner myself, and I used to find quite often with students, if they didn't give me enough language, I couldn't give them a high band. Sometimes I realized that there was potential for better, but if I didn't hear it, I couldn't mark what I didn't hear. And so if you don't give the examiner enough language to assess, it's going to be difficult and they'll struggle to give you a high band. So try as far as possible to get up to 2 minutes on this part. So here are some notes that I made. So the situation is about an early morning meeting, which was regular, which involved the whole department where I was working. And it was vital and really important to be there because this was the meeting where things were decided. The reason I was late on this particular occasion was because the traffic was bad due to poor weather conditions, and I didn't allow any extra time. What happened when I got into the meeting? Everyone stared, I felt really embarrassed, and there was only one chair and it was right at the back of the room, so I had to climb over everybody to get there. And what did I do? I apologised very quietly, and then after the meeting I explained and apologised again, and the boss said not to worry about it, which was was a good result. So that was the end of it. Okay, so I'm going to do this now, and I'm going to use my notes on the right-hand side. I can't promise it will be exactly 2 minutes, but I think it should be approximately 2 minutes. And if the examiner stops you in the exam, in this speaking part, it's not a big deal. It doesn't matter. It's better that than you don't say enough. Okay. So I'm in the exam, I've worked out the notes for my cue card, and I'm going to start. So the situation I want to tell you about was when I was late for an early meeting in my office. We had these meetings once a week, and they were attended by the whole department. And it was very important that everybody in the department came to these meetings, because it was when we made the big decisions for the week ahead. And so on this occasion, I was 15 minutes late for this meeting, which was actually quite a big deal. And I was very worried about this lateness. The reason I was late was because that morning there had been a lot of very bad traffic on the road, and it held me up pretty badly. There had been some snow and ice overnight, which made the roads very slippery. And in addition to that, the morning was quite foggy. So the weather conditions were pretty appalling. And unfortunately, I didn't allow any extra time for my journey. And as a result of that, I got stuck in the traffic, and that's what made me late to the meeting. When I arrived at my office, I hurried very quickly to the room where the meeting was being held. And as I opened the door, I was obviously out of breath and a little bit disheveled. And everybody, to a man in that room, stared at me. I felt really, really embarrassed, and also, you know, quite ashamed of being late for this really important meeting. I looked around, and the only chair that was vacant in the room was right at the back. So to add insult to injury, I then had to climb over everybody in the meeting to get to the chair. I apologized very quietly as I did that, but you can imagine it made me even more embarrassed. Once I got seated in the chair, I decided to keep my head down and not say anything else until the meeting had ended. And then after the meeting, I went up to my boss and I explained what had happened and why I was late, and I apologized again very profusely. But he said not to worry, because it couldn't be helped. And that made me feel a lot better about the situation. Okay, so that's the sort of part 2 that you need to be producing. So based on those really sort of scant notes, you can expand them into full sentences, and all the time I had a picture in my head of what was going on in that story. So just a few more things about part 2 particularly. Tell a story. The thing about telling a story is that it's something that you can picture in your head. You know what happened. You know the people who were there. As I was telling you the story of being late for the meeting, I had a picture of the room. I had a picture of my boss at the head of the table. I had a picture of the other people. I had a picture of their faces when I went into the room. And all of this helps you to tell it more fluently. Have an opening. And if you heard, I said the time I was late that I want to tell you about was, or you could say the party I want to tell you about is. So have a little opening sentence so that you can, it helps the examiner get into the story. Add details that are relevant and maybe interesting. So I added the detail about the chair that was right at the back of the room, and how that added to the embarrassment because I had to climb over everybody to get to it. If you say approximately 3 things for each of the points on the card, you should get to around 2 minutes, but you can practice this and time it so that you know for yourself. You may speak more quickly, you may speak more slowly. You need to factor that in. So practice it and try it for yourself. And then one of the most important things is practice, practice, practice. And I've spelled practice wrong. I'm sorry. It should be an S. So I apologize before for that. you do know practice with a C is the noun, and I should have practice with an S here. So I've made a mistake, but noticed it. And record yourself doing just pick up any question, record it, then listen, decide how you can improve it, and then redo the same topic, the same card, and then listen again. And if you can improve it further, then do it a third time. So the same one, don't move on to another one until you've improved that one. And this is something that you can easily do completely by yourself. Okay, I had one student did this, and he used to record it 7, 8, 9, 10, even 12 times. And each time it got better and better. And then slowly he found with new topics that he only needed to record it twice or 3 times. But it really does work. And then finally, try and get a sense of 2 minutes. So if you practice this and record it, you'll know approximately. Don't try and time it properly, because that will just that will just distract you, and the examiner has the time, so you don't need to worry. But it's a good idea to know approximately what 2 minutes might be. Okay, so let me now move on to point 4, which is pronunciation. So more and more nowadays, examiners are taking note of pronunciation. So it's important that you know whether there are any points of pronunciation, either sounds that you make which are not quite clear, or perhaps some intonation, or your stress patterns, any of those things when you're speaking that might not be, you know, quite as good as they could be, need to be practiced. And there are several sites online where you can do this. And in fact, I've also written a post with the same title as this video, and in that post, which is on my website at IELTSlearningtips.com, you'll find a couple of links there to some pronunciation sites. If you're not sure about your pronunciation, then ask the speaking buddies and speaking partners if they feel there are any points you should practice. And a good indication is if you say something and the person doesn't understand. Usually that's an indication that there's something in the pronunciation. It could, of course, be that something in their understanding, but often it's something in your pronunciation that is stopping them from understanding. So try and isolate what that is and go and practice it. And you can do this by drilling. So if it's a sound, you just keep doing the sound over and over until you get it right. But the pronunciation sites will show you how you can do this. And the 5th point that I want to say is build your confidence. Don't be scared. One thing that really holds students back is being too afraid in the exam. If you practice and you prepare well, there is no need to be afraid. Go into the exam with confidence, and that confidence will give you a good performance. And it's better not to think about what you want to say in terms of grammar and vocabulary. It's better to focus on the question. So listen carefully to the question and give the appropriate answer, but focus on the question. And when you focus on the question, the correct vocabulary and grammar usually comes automatically. If you focus on the grammar and the vocabulary, you tend to hesitate. And above all, the speaking is about communication. And that means fluency and spontaneity. And if you're trying to look for specific words or specific phrases or check if you've got the right tense, you're not going to communicate well because you're not going to be spontaneous. So focus on the questions. Focus also on the examiner, because they will tell you if they want to move on, or they will tell you by their body language and their expression if they want you to say more, or if they're ready to give you another question. So do keep some eye contact with the examiner. Communication is a two-way process, and I know in the IELTS it's more about you speaking, but there will be signals from the examiner, and you know, keep an eye. And finally, I was an examiner myself, and I know lots of examiners, and I have never met an examiner who didn't want every candidate to do the best they could do. So they're gunning for you. They want you to do well. So they're not there to shoot you down. They want you to do well. So, you know, if you practice and you're ready, then you can help them in that process. So 5 things you can do regularly to improve your speaking. If you go along to my website, IELTSlearning.com, then you can find, as I said before, an article with some links on this topic and also on the other topics that are in the videos. If you want to get more videos from me about IELTS Band 7 and 8, then hit the subscribe button below and then you'll be notified when a new video is posted. And don't forget, put some comments in the box, any advice you have or any sites you found that you think are useful. It would be very good to share them with other people. Okay, thank you for watching this video and I'll see you on the next video. Goodbye.